Hello, everybody, and welcome to the LJLOfficially Unofficial Podcast, episode 31. I will be one of your hosts, Alex, otherwise known as Lexi. Goodbye, Miles on the internet. My face isn't currently moving because of some technical problems, but we're still persistent enough to keep bringing you the LJL content you all deserve. I am, of course, joined by the first-class man himself, the legend, Initialize, Samuel, Initialize Hapgood. Hello, sir. Welcome to the stream as always.
Pleasure to be here.
Pleasure to have you, obviously, sir. And of course, we've got the superb man himself that loves to believe he is the most superior analyst above us all with his predictions. Alex.
Wait, did I win?
Hapgood, sir. Welcome.
Did I win?
Possibly. I think I did a quick math, and I
actually didn't. Oh, scumbag. Oh, that is just the best way to start this out. I'm happy now. I'm in a good mood. You're going to get happy this time.
Much like T1, I've failed in the last hurdle to get the overall,
Cheers to that.
Best analyst.
So I did the math. If I'd actually got the Burning Core one, I think I tied with. I would have won it because I was 2 points behind. Sam, you were
a while behind. Okay.
Yeah.
Fine.
Some of your more outreaching assumptions.
Yeah, I went for the bold calls.
And if you had got them, you would have dominated us.
But no. Okay.
All or nothing. You took spring, so you gave us summer. I see.
That's exactly it. Cut. You understand.
Oh, man, gotta go change some roles around on the Discord. Well, anyway, what were these predictions about, Lexi?
Oh, sir, it's all about this podcast, the LJL region. And Nymera, what are we actually doing on this podcast?
Well, it turns out we do a bit of anything and everything. We're kind of like the jack of all trades, but only in regards to Japanese League of Legends. We do everything covering that and League of Legends in a wider sense. We try and do a bit of everything.
And I mean, if we're doing a bit of everything, you would assume maybe Papa Riot or some of their affiliation or partners Initialized would have something to do with us.
They really don't. We wish they did, but if they were, at the minute, it's all off our own back. But Riot, if you're out there and listening, hit us up. We'd love to be involved. Until that time, we are completely doing this off our own backs.
Yeah, and obviously most of the podcasts they do separately, but who knows one day, lads? Who knows one day? Of course, all of the views and opinions are of our own. Anything we do say does not represent the LJL official unofficial brand. This is merely just our podcast where we talk about LJL stuff, and keeping it around the same name just helps with branding and marketing, everybody. So, cha-ching. As well as you can find all of our social medias underneath our lovely faces. But if you're listening through audio form, which you can get this podcast, it's underneath each of us, at Master1 for myself, at Initialize for the man in the middle, and at Nymera on the opposite end of myself. You can also find the LJL officially unofficial Twitter, Twitch, and Facebook pages, and Instagram actually as well. We're far more active over on our Discord server and our Twitter, but we're branching out slowly with the other social media networks as we go forward.
Yeah, we do what we can.
We try to, and as I hinted towards earlier, you are able to find this podcast on all audio major streaming platforms, including Anchor, Spotify, and iTunes as well. Gentlemen, this podcast is going to be a little bit of an interesting one. It's the last podcast before we see V3 perform at Worlds, and well, we've been watching how the general public and analysts and coaches around the world, their predictions on play-ins, how V3's chances are, as well as their Group B compatriots. But they're also going to be covering stuff happening over in the EU Masters, from the meta to things to learn from and to maybe think about moving forward as we go into checking into solo queue and seeing what the players of V3 have been playing, and also just in general what we've been seeing on the solo queue ladder, and some discussions how that might affect the V3 team. We're also going to be talking about the other teams, and we're going to be trying and remain as unbiased as possible, but these are our own views and opinions podcasts, so if we say something and it sounds extreme, it's because we genuinely believe in that. And lastly, quick shout out over to the VCS lovely people. They're currently running a huge competition at the moment. It's not really much of a competition, but that's the place where I'm going to be sending people over from our Discord. If you want to do the pick'ems, play-in predictions and everything, go over to the VCS Discord. They're hosting a lovely competition.
I'll go and do that at some point.
Absolutely. Recommend that all of our listeners are interested, go and compete with our sister league. Show them that we're the better predictors. And
that's it.
For superior analysts, remember everyone, V3 4-0 across the board. When it happens, you'll thank us.
Look, every time myself and Nymeria have ended up on the analyst desk, I'm just saying, Nymeria and myself, we've just been better than your ways. The way it is, he's got a ways to go, isn't it? And if he wants to come over and learn from the best, then that's what he's going to do. Otherwise, we'll go and school him again.
Sam, perchance do you also like your eggs poached, or?
I'm just wondering when the play-by-play.
Every day he's going to slip into my DMs and say, "What the hell are you doing, man? Get off my analyst." But there we go.
Well, gentlemen, and to end us out, we'll have some questions from our lovely listeners out there. We are going to be interesting how this conversation goes, gentlemen. But first things first, let's talk about, well, really, V3's chances. They're in an interesting group. Let's probably run through the group first that they're going to be placing the round robin in. Potentially the team they could face off in the best of 5. And then we could also talk about, if we wanted to, the second place team that they might also be facing from the opposite side of the bracket, because that's how the bracket works. And I see a lot of analysts actually misunderstanding the bracket system, which is
bit sad.
It's like when you see the team sat there in the group draw phase, and like one person on the team understands how it actually works. And I'm like, guys, it's only like it's your life's work and you're living right now. Come on.
Well, I kind of forgive the players for not understanding, because they just focus on the game as they come. I kind of really appreciate
staff
that.
needs to know.
Yeah, management should know.
Yeah.
I mean, for God's sake, analysts should know. Journalists should know. I've read too many things where, like, I don't think they're going to beat second place of Talon. And I'm just like, we don't play second. God damn, dense fuckers.
Yeah. So as a reminder, guys, the group stage works thus. There are 2 play-ins groups of 5 teams. You have a best of 1 round robin, and the team single round robin. You don't play multiple times. It's only the once you play every other member in your group. The team that comes first in both groups immediately seed straight into groups. They are in. The teams that seed last are removed from the competition. That means you have seeds 2, 3, and 4 remaining, who have a little bit of a bracket playoffs to see who will the last team from each group will be to go into group stage. That means it works a little bit like this. Seeds 3 and 4 in both groups play each other, and the winner will move on to play seed 2, best of 5, and you play off against the seed 2 from the other group. So seed 2 from Group A will play seed 3 or 4 from Group B, and vice versa. You don't play just in the same group. It doesn't work like that.
So,
sure.
There is a lot to break down here. First off, let's run through the actual groups. Group A is, last time I did this, it was technically wrong, but someone loved my pronunciation, so we're going with it anyway. We've got ints, because they like to int. That's their name.
Lexi.
We got Legacy Esports, Mad Lions, Supermassive Esports, and Team Liquid all over in Group A. Group B, our group, the most important group in all of Worlds. Forget about the other groups that Initialize is lovely covered in some articles, which you should definitely go check out on Jinx. See, plug it.
Hang on, because this is a league podcast. Remember, guys, this is with a G, not a J. Because this is the name of the website, not the champion. Right? Yeah, that's the one. It's on there.
It will be in the show notes as well, so we'll get a link in the show notes. So don't worry about that group.
It's nice for us to support our own personal platforms whilst also doing a group effort.
Exactly. It's all about growing our individual and brand in general. We have got Group B. We've got Chinese number 4 seed, worth talking about, LGD Gaming. We've got PGS Talon. We have Rainbow 7, Unicorns of Love, and V3 Esports. So we're mostly going to focus far more on Group B, as that is our group, and then we might try and do some just hypothesizing about a few, like 1 or 2 of the teams that we could face if we reach them in the best of 5 over on Group A side. But first off, we let's go in actually just giving our predictions just in general, and then we can kind of break it down as we go through. I'm predicting personally that we will make it out of this group stage. Yeah, I'm confident in V3.
The question is, just so we finish off your thoughts on that bit, do you think second, third, or fourth? Well, I mean, the first I'd imagine is LGD. Do you reckon second through fourth? Which one do you reckon?
I think I actually think first, because it's a best of one series, it actually favors V3's adaptability hugely, and the different type of playstyles that they've shown us over especially summer. They could actually steal first. It's a steal to a degree, but it's not crazy. I think realistically, though, the second/third, depending on if they upset like Unicorns of Love or something.
Yeah,
in the general.
I think LGD to me and what I've seen of them, I think will be a step far. Their solo laners and Peanut, very. And I think that might be a bit difficult. Not that I think V3 are bad, or certainly not out of the running, but I think LGD are legitimately a very.
You are cutting out a
and
little
yourself,
bit. Myself, I'm thinking third right now.
Okay.
I'm thinking just because V3 are a good best of one team. Don't get me wrong. I think we're probably going to lose to LGD. I think because it's a best of one, because it's single round robin, those upsets, because there are only 4 games, much more likely to make an impact. And of course, the classic wildcard upset has been tale as old as League of Legends, really. I mean, it happened back in Season 2, TPA. Season 4, we had Kaboom. We've had a whole load of stories with that. You also have teams like UOL, which had a perfect regular season in best of ones. LGD, very, very talented team. Of course, PSG and LGD both had best of 3 regular season. I think Rainbow Seven had a bit of a tough time making it here. They weren't first going into their playoffs as far as I'm aware. I actually haven't researched them as much as I would have liked to. Actually, I really should have done that. But I think that V3 are probably like second or third in terms of assumed strength and best of ones coming into it. So I'm thinking right now, maybe third, particularly because PSG have had a lot of roster issues. I know it might sound a bit disrespectful to PSG, but given that they have 3 of their 5 starting lineup, preferred starting lineup, of course they have some substitutes coming in, playing for partial amount of play-ins, I think that's going to hit them quite a lot, particularly in these first stages of the best of ones.
So, we're all predicting that. So, I'm predicting them to potentially make it out. Do you guys are thinking they're either going to make it to the best of 5? We're all predicting they're going to make best of 5.
I think it would be a shock to me if they don't make best.
Yeah.
I think we'll talk a little bit about why people are sleeping on them later, but I think from what I've seen of them, they should be more than good enough to get to that point. I think UOL looked like the most direct competition. I think Talon are in trouble with 3 of their members switching out, and they were already a very slow team, which I think really hurt versus the likes of V3 or Unicorns or LGD for that matter. So I think they're stylistically in a difficult matchup there of Talon. And I'm not that impressed from what them. Again, I need to do a little bit more than just watch their finals, but I struggle to see a lot out of them. Rainbow Seven are the final team in Group C.
Yeah.
I
sure.
think...
Yes, Sam, you need to maybe sit a bit closer to your mic, Sam. We're starting to lose you a little bit.
Okay. Yeah, I can do that. I mean, it's turning... Interestingly, I've got it turning up every time I'm speaking.
Well, it might
be
Discord
more
stuff.
my Discord end.
Anyway.
So I'll just a quick faddle. I'll be right back.
So let's actually do that. Let's first break down each of the teams. We've been talking already about PSG, so it's worth us actually discussing where we think they're going to end up. PSG, honestly, is the team I've least researched, so I'm kind of leaning on you guys a little bit more. I just haven't actually done an interview or a sit down with anyone, an expert from the region yet. I've done it for pretty much every other region, but yeah, this is the one team I know far less about. I know they're having roster problems. They're missing
3.
And that's going to be for the first day, isn't it, of Worlds? Or is it going to be for both days?
Partial. So they're Korean players, so that's River and Tank, their starting jungler and mid laner, can't play for any of play-ins. And then also their AD carry, Unified, can't play for partial amount of play-ins. They haven't said exactly how much. So they're bringing in, I believe it's one of their coaches, a guy called D, into that starting bot lane position. That's going to be a problem because they have played around Unified so much. They love to kind of chill in the early game and then come up to a point where they can fight around this very strong AD carry. So losing that and maybe having to play around the top side might change how things are going to work for them.
Yeah.
So do we need to think this was a team before the problems with their roster was going to be a team that was going to be very stiff competition, or do we think this was a team that was going...
They were pulled on for a reason. I mean, I think that even before the changes, I think before the changes, I would have said it was a 3-horse race for second place between UOL, V3, and PSG. I think that PSG, even coming out of the finals with that roster, had a couple of issues which I think would not serve them particularly well. I think that they're not nearly punishing enough in the laning phase to make someone like V3 worry. Because I think if you're looking at V3, my main worry is, maybe Ace and Paz get thrown under the bus a bit. I care less about bot lane because I think Archer and Reiner can stand up to more high-level competition in that regard. And of course, Boogie is all over the map. It's not going to be like, say, when DFM played CJ and Unica just got a bit ran over, for those of you listening to us from an LJL perspective.
Boogie's too smart for that.
And of course, we have our own information. Yeah, we've got our own information on V3 and we have our own biases towards them. But my main worry for V3 is, can you punish Paz in laning phase in the same as Ace? Can you just make sure these guys just never get to do anything in game, and then V3 don't get to settle into these winning team compositions because they understand what they need to do within a game?
Yeah. I think before we go too much further as well on that one, like Talon, as far as I've seen, like things to be stable so they can scale up.
12 to 15 minutes, they just chill.
Yeah, exactly. And the thing is, versus like a team like V3, who generally have very precise, I think the word is to plan for the first 10 minutes to make something interesting happen on the map that throws the other team off. Be that shove in, split the map up, have Boogie dive at level 3, having, have Reiner force people back under tower and stuff. Be that, look to just have Boogie's Nidalee go in and invade on Raptors level 1. Be that lane swap is the one I was kind of going to end up and finish on. I think the likes of Talon have to be very afraid of the fact that V3 are quite accomplished at pulling off sort of complex macro movements in the early game. And I think if you're looking for a stable lane phase, V3 aren't going to give you that.
V3 are the kind of team that can play almost anything and can change things up at the moment. They've been the best team playing multiple different comps in the LJL this split, and truly I think that's something that a lot of is getting overlooked at the moment, which we will get into a little bit later. I do want to keep this far more on this kind of stuff. We will go into things we found in a little bit later. That'll be more fun. All right, so PSG we think is now pretty winnable, relatively speaking, because of what's happened to the roster.
Yeah, because I think Unified is such an important player to these guys. I picked Ibrah's brains about it a little bit. He's one of the color casters for the PCS broadcast. And I mean, one of the things for PSG is they still have Kaiwing. Kaiwing is such a good support player, and I think in a lot of ways, Reiner versus Kaiwing is now the match I'm like, hey, that's kind of what I want to see. Because unfortunately, we're not going to see River, who was V3's jungler from last year, play against them, because obviously he's one of those Korean players that can't make it in. So the question is, can Kaiwing be that engaged player his team needs him to be? And also Hanabi is very fearless as a player, is the way I've had him described to me. Even when he's 0 and 5, he will still be making like the shy kind of plays. Question is that the kind of thing which will then allow them to take winning team fights even when they are down in the early game? Can Kaiwing help them with that? I'm just worried that if they don't have Tank, River, and Unified, they just don't have the synergy to pull that off, even when they've had a bit of time and they have a high level of individual talent. I'm just worried for them on a whole team basis, really, just in terms of that synergy.
Sadly, might be a case of Rascal Jesters. However, these players are more individually talented, and especially the substitutes coming in on a mechanical level, at least. So, that's PSG Talon. Let's go on to the big daddy of the whole region. Not region. Well, actually, this is their home region. They have actually got a stadium in China.
They do.
LGD Gaming. I mean, gentlemen, this is the team that everyone has pegged to go 4-0 at almost everyone's expecting a 4-0. A 3-1 would be
any loss would be an upset. Any loss.
Yeah.
In fact, in some ways, I know that Chinese fans can be really, really quite rabid in their taking down of their own teams when they don't perform well. I think if there's any loss by LGD in this playing stage, they're going to get a lot of hatred thrown at them, because I think they have such a weight of talent behind them, and China has such high aspirations this tournament.
Well, yeah, I think just the LPL as a whole is has been on the rise for the last couple of years. They have got the last two Worlds winners, different Worlds winners, neither of whom are here at this tournament because other teams have come up and stepped up beyond them. LGD are the last in the line of that. They are the 4th place team. But for all that, they have got some immense talent on their roster. The likes of Longxi in the top lane is fantastic. I love watching this guy play carries. I think he's brilliant. Peanut, Rox Tigers fame, SKT fame is brilliant. You're looking at Xie in the mid lane. I don't know if you saw the LPL Trash Talk video, which came out today.
So good.
Where basically it's just clips of Xie deleting deaths when he was on EDG, just over and over and over again, and Xie just smiles. Like, that's basically the trash talk from him. Like, this guy is really, really
See, he
good in
laughs
the
at
mid lane
that,
as well.
but honestly, EDG trashed that region when Death was still there, so I don't know, man. Not sure you want to see it, show the other clips.
True that, but GA had a reputation. He still does. I think their bot side is still good, but tends to be, at least from what I've seen, left a little bit more to its own devices. But I'll need to.
Yeah, but Kramer is still
He's
ridiculous.
very good. He's a great Jhin player as well.
Yeah, no, Kramer's an import Korean ADC, and he's just been absolutely. I mean, he's had a history to him. I'm trying to remember the teams he was on, but yeah, I remember him very fondly. Back from season 6, season 5.
Interestingly, he hasn't played any Jhin as of. Oh wait, did he? Am I just looking at the wrong thing here? No, he just hasn't played any Jhin in a while. Which is interesting to see.
You know what's
he's played the one.
You know what's really quite a storyline here, because Kramer used to play for the Flash Wolves.
He did.
He used to play for Flash Wolves, and they were the LMS now, which is now the PCS region. So we've got a number of talent hailing from there. Of course, he's Korean himself, so he's not a LMS national, but still has some history with that region.
Yeah, I mean, let's be real. The big part and what I keep hearing repeated from analysts and casters and everything else, and anyone I find on Twitter or talk to in general, is it's all relying on Peanut and ZA. That they are the main two carries. They are the vocal point of the team. ZA has been picking up this Twisted Fate that has become synonymous with the team now, especially during the playing stage for it. That's why they partly had a run, because people just had to just respect this Twisted Fate. And Peanut is just going to be the point of contention, which is going to make a really interesting match to see how V3, specifically Boogie and Ace, compete against that at the moment. I mean, this is going to be the true test, because we saw in the LJL that duo just had something a little bit more than every other bit of competition.
Yeah, and I mean, the last series, the series they lost in playoffs and knocked them down into the regional qualifier, a lot of that was Peanut kind of getting caught out on his own. He's a really good jungler. He does run over winning jungle matchups like no one else. This guy is really, really talented, and I think if you give him space to do something in a game, he'll absolutely take it. The question is, if you're up against a experienced duo which can punish him when he's out of position, what's going to happen with that? I think the thing with V3, much like we saw against Sengoku, was that they are just very willing to go support Boogie in whatever he's doing. So I'm hoping that maybe V3 can make them sweat a little. Do I think it's enough to close out a game? No. But it might be enough to start blunting some of these strengths. And it gives it that. If they're going to win, it's probably going to be through that.
Yeah, I mean, it's also worth, how did LGD lose their 3rd place match to Suning? The answer is basically that SOFM is a nutter and a psychopath in the jungle, and also had his team basically follow him on some of the most insane level 1s I have seen in quite some time. And Peanut would lose his entire red side jungle at level 1.
Yep.
And there would be nothing he could do at that point. He's out of the game, and the map falls apart without him being able to dictate things as well, particularly. And if Boogie plus members of V3 can kind of do what they do when they support Boogie on early invades, there is a world where that happens. I think it's still going to be hard.
I also think a team like UOL could also potentially upset. I think V3 and UOL both have very strong mid-jungle duos in terms of just fucking with the enemy jungler.
Yeah,
I think there's a chance. I think there's a chance between those.
I really rate No Man's.
Yeah, I think No Man's might be the play-ins player to watch. For me, it's Boogie because I love that guy. But I think obviously I don't have the context of the CIS as a region as well as some other people coming in.
No Man's great.
But I do think that No Man's is really good. I think Ananasik really, really good. However, I just think that Boogie and Ace also have that ability. So I think those are the two teams where if you're going to upset LGD, it's probably going to be through some jungle weirdness from these two teams.
Jungle weirdness is the prediction. LGD, how much of a % chance do you think V3 are going to beat? Or, well, LGD, what are the odds, kind of, you guys? Do you think it's 30% of the time V3 win? Best of 1 series, crazy draft, something LGD aren't prepared for? and then they just pull it out the bag? And is that something that is coming in, or is it just going to be something like a 20-80 in favor of LGD?
So percentages. Okay, let me before I say a percentage, because I'm not quite sure what number I put on it before. Langji is terrifying. He was the guy that was solo killing the Shy on stuff like Ornn into Renekton. He just does that. And he has he does play a lot of different champions, which somehow he managed to get kill threat on in matchups where he shouldn't really. He's very, very aggressive when he does get a lead in those side lanes too. Peanut is more than a match for Boogie in a lot of regards. I love Boogie, but I do think Peanut is one. I mean, he's from the LPL and he's had top tier competition throughout the entirety of the year. Boogie is great, don't get me wrong, and I think he'll have a real splash this Worlds, but I do think that going up against LPL junglers is always going to be an issue. And then you've also got very strong carries on the side of LGD too. I think pound for pound, LGD are just a much stronger team. That's what you expect from the world's best region right now versus the LJL, which does have talent in it. We love to expose them, but it's just not. It's not the LPL, right? No. I think it's probably somewhere between 20 and 30% to V3.
Sure.
I'm not sure I cap it out at 30%. I think 25% even feels like a bit of a risk for me. But I think that's I would give them 25% because I think V3 have the practice and best of ones, whereas LGD didn't have that in regular season. And as much as, first game of a best of 3 is still a best of 1, don't get me wrong. I think that V3 have the diversity in drafts and strategy and have had some pretty good prep against the teams which we've seen them against thus far to have at least that outside chance of beating them.
Yeah. Okay. Yourself, Andrew?
I think that's a fairly fair take. I think I probably edged to about 20% myself as well. Basically because I do think there is still an element of the way the LPL plays is something that G2 and the likes do as well, is that they do take risks. Those are risks that are there to win you the game. They basically say, look, we can mechanically outplay this and we'll win doing that. The problem is when you take those risks, sometimes you get the consequences of it, and they're not very pleasant ones. And there is absolutely a world where the likes of V3 collapse on a over-aggressive jungle invade, for example, and turn things around and snowball it the other way. I expect it to be hard work because, this is true for UOL actually as well. I think No Man's and Anastic could very easily do very similar things. Gadget as well, I think, is a very good bot laner. Where effectively, LGD get a little bit arrogant or overreach and get punished for it, and sort of the counter snowball happens. I still give them the advantage, but it's not like someone like the SKT of old, right? Who just said like it's a 90% chance they win, whatever, because they're so damn stable and they will always hit their win conditions. They just don't take the same risks.
And then there's like a 7% chance that they make a comeback victory anyway.
Yeah, exactly. And they basically just say our level of players up here and no one else is there, so we can play this style and no one can match us.
Yeah.
Whereas this way, it's like actually
20%.
There is still that room where, potentially they can punch with the style that LGD play and a lot of the LPL play. There is a chance where you punch up as well as down in a way that sometimes the likes of a team that plays a more consistent style, the chances of punching up are a lot lower.
Yeah, no, it's just in general, 20% for you, that's 1 in 5. There's a 1 in 5 chance that V3 do it. For me and Alex, it's 0.25%, 1 in 4. I think that's a pretty realistic depiction, especially in a best of 1 format where there's so many intangibles around, and you just don't know what players are going to play like on the day. You don't know what
complete disclosure as well. Like, I am a huge Peanut fanboy from way back when he was like first debuting the league, and like this is a Nidalee Graves meta. Like, he's got a great meta for him right now, even if it's a good one for Boogie too. And I'm very excited to see him back on the international stage.
Yeah. Anyway, let's head over to a team that, honestly, 5-6 days ago, I knew absolutely nothing about. And now I actually know a little bit about. And that, my dear sirs, is Rainbow Seven, a Latin America team. How much did you know about these guys?
So I knew the name because they'd gotten to an international wildcard tournament before, I think. Let me just check. And they went to Rift Rivals back in 2018. That's what they went to. So I'd heard them a little bit. I'm not necessarily familiar with most of their players outside of their support, Shadow, forcing the EU Shadow to change his gamer tag, which was kind of funny because you can't have two people with... You have to have unique gamer tags.
Sure.
Some of the names. So and the thing about the Latin America and stuff is that they ended up forming into LLA this year instead of having LATAM North and LATAM South. So I knew a little bit about the region through that. But honestly, the only thing I really knew about this region, not even Rainbow Seven, was about Isurus last year, which of course was in the group with DFM.
Yeah, Isurus was the one I knew far more. So I learned a little bit about Rainbow Seven. I've been doing a bit of scouting. And talking, a lot of people from the region actually are far more realistic. They seem to be around the same place as us with V3 Esports. They're all predicting second or third place seems pretty reasonable. They also think, personally, what's been interesting and something we'll have to discuss later is they actually think this play-in format's actually worse for wildcard regions as opposed to better from what we've been having. An interesting fact that I didn't know is Rainbow versus V3, Latin America in general, has always had an upper hand versus Japan. Both regions have new teams, but Rainbow 7 back in 2017, different roster. They were able to beat DFM back then. And their kind of point was, well, we've always had a Latin America advantage over every roster that has been sent from Japan. We've always had an advantage. We've normally won. And that's kind of a consensus I'm seeing, which honestly is kind of fair, right?
It kind of is, but then the game which I remember from play-ins, besides that one Loki win in that first game in the best of 5 versus Damwon of last year's play-in stage, was when DFM kind of bottled it versus Isurus, and they had that 50-minute game. But then, like, you go back to that and you look at what DFM was playing and the way they were playing, you're just like, oh god, that's kind of meh. You don't really know how they're drafting. Don't really know how they're working with their macro either. So I had a lot of questions about the LJL as a region from that, and even when we were deciding which region we were going to cover as a casting crew, we were like, how good's the LJL actually going to be, guys? How's that going to work out? And honestly,
pretty fucking good, apparently.
Turns out, honestly, throughout this year, DFM came into spring and they'd completely fixed up so much of that. Their drafting has been crazy. So I think that if you're going to look at where the regions have gone from last year, I think the LJL has definitely stepped up. Has the LLA stepped up? I think every region has done to an extent. It's just the way the history tends to work, right? When you see better teams play, even on just your other streams you're watching, you tend to pick up lessons from them. So I think they will have got better too. But I look at some of the drafts which are still coming out of, like, even the finals and stuff, and I'm seeing stuff like Aatrox still being quite prominent, some weirdness coming through, and I'm still not sure about the LLA and how clear so one of the things, I mean, this is going to be a bit of a tangent, but one of the things I've really enjoyed about the LJL this year, and it's also when we've gone over to the VCS2, is that it feels like to me, after I come out of Champion Select, I'm there and I'm going, this team should probably win because of XYZ, because of the team composition. And most of the time in the LJL, that's how it happens. Most of the time these teams kind of understand how a game's going to go on. I remember we were invited on to... Oh no, I was doing a VOD review of some VCS teams, and it was one of the Flash games where I think there was Flash versus... Might have been Secret or might have been Percent. It was two very macro heavy teams, but
oh, I've known this story.
Yeah, and Flash were playing like a Kha'Zix Galio comp, and this is like a Season 8 bread and butter KT Rolster combo. We use the Kha'Zix to battle ward, and you just have a Galio flying in, and when it comes into team fights, he can just position himself invisible, jump into the backline, and get Galio there. Took him like 25 minutes to figure out that combo in the game. They were just trying to see hero, kill hero up until that point.
This one,
and as much as I love Flash, and I think they ended up finishing up there, and this is just one game amongst many, it might have just been an off game. In fact, I know it's kind of an off game in some regards, but some regions in the wildcards just kind of fight, and they haven't thought about the higher level stuff about, does this composition do X, Y, and Z? We look to the interview which Paz had after the finals, which Lexi is very helpfully linked to us in our podcast document and stuff like that. Where
in the show notes, everybody.
Yeah,
It'll be in the show notes.
And Paz was talking about, we immediately identified what the FM wanted to do with their engaged support with the Shen. We knew exactly what was going to happen with that, and that means we can do X, Y, Z with our lanes, and I can do this in lane, and I can do that. The team of V3 in particular seem to understand the core concepts of what their team comps can and can't do, and most of the time play accordingly to it. And that's why I am higher on the LJL this year compared to DFM last year. It kind of felt where they were just shit without a rudder and they didn't understand what their comps were doing.
Yeah, and I think the other thing is, like, when it came to international, was DFM tried in the first week or so to play a style that wasn't them as well, and then looked
like random
really
point.
off. And it felt really off as a result. And I get you want to innovate and be to the world's meta, but there's also something to be actually like they came in and just played something that just didn't work. I was like, well, that went well, didn't it, boys? Whereas I don't expect that from V3, and I actually think they have got a fairly good roster and read on the meta, such as it is. The likes of Lilia and Hecarim being fairly high priority, and Buki being Lilia in particular, he's very, very good at. I think is pretty exciting, and he's a notorious Evelyn player. I am so excited to see this.
Before we go much further down that rabbit
I know,
hole,
but exactly. My point.
So I know it's a tangent, but basically it's like, LLA advantage of the LJL. I'm like, well, maybe not this year, because it seems like the LJL seems to have a better handle on the core concepts of what can my team do here and now.
And like I'm looking at Rainbow Seven's like most banned and stuff, and like they ban Kalista because they can't play against it, and like they have to ban that versus Archer and Reinhardt because they will lose that lane. And you know, this is like one of their big Leza is 30% of their damage share, right? And he's a good AD carry, fantastic Ashe player, but he's even though he's playing Ashe, he's still banning Kalista. Oh, have we still got Lexi? Find out.
Shall hopefully see. Anyway, so I guess kind of hitting on this point a little bit more. Yeah, so I do think that. So I know that. So when I was talking to Ibris and stuff, he was saying, we're talking about the Kalista thing. He was saying that he wasn't really impressed with PSG's Kalista play. He thinks that the team's kind of mad around it, and I think that a large part of that is if you're going to chill in the early game, you can't really play Kalista. She requires too much from the early lane, snowballing into dragons, slowballing to heralds, rotating around the map, and just being that focal point of the map. Where if you're not rotating at all, it kind of goes a bit meh. I think if you're Rainbow 7 and you're also not playing it, suddenly that means that V3 is kind of the Kalista team. I know Kramer is actually a very good Kalista player.
He was historically, yeah. The problem is they don't play around him that much. Well, they haven't historically. Sure. I mean, again, it's okay. It's a bit of a lie. Basically, Gia and Peanut turning up somewhere tends to be. From
they
what I've
spread
seen
the pressure out from mid as opposed to like it's starting out bot. That's more like the CJ kind of style play, I guess. Actually, from our perspective.
I know this is something we've mentioned before, but I tend to agree with Frostgurn's read on Kalista, saying like, is Kalista good or bad right now is kind of a little bit irrelevant. It's whether you're a good Kalista team or not. You can be a fantastic Kalista
I had the same
player
kind of feelings
otherwise.
toward Caitlyn too.
Yeah.
I think that.
I think that's true. Very true.
I mean, Caitlyn.
It's just the vague comparison. I mean, for ages, you guys just kept talking, so I was like, I'll let you keep going. You guys go. I was just like, I'll let you keep going for a little bit. I'll see how long, and I'll be like, Kalista. Oh god, okay. Now I've got to cut this conversation short now. So this is going down.
We thought we had to fill space. Didn't know if there were issues again, but glad you're back.
No, I mean I was just watching you guys. Honestly, not creepy. I swear. It's not creepy. The closing thought thing that I completely missed for Rainbow 7 is this is actually a rebuild team. So they were originally known as Leon Gaming, the Kings of the North, and they used to be the best team in Latin North America before the servers merged. And that was why they had previously gone and had that success in 2018 and 2017. And then after the servers merged in 2019, they actually fell from grace and then haven't been able to win a final until this split. So this is very much for their narrative kind of purpose. A return to former form that has been waited for a long time from the region.
Yeah. And, we would have known more about that if we've reached out towards their country's experts and stuff like that, much like people could do with the LJL, which we'll talk about later.
Sir, I did reach out to their experts.
Someone was paying attention.
Someone did. Gentlemen.
Do we need to talk about... Oh, sorry, continue, sir.
Gentlemen, we have one last team for us to talk about before we go on to our next topic that I know I can tell we're all breaming and rhyme as prime as anything else to fully go into. Let us talk about the Unicorns of Love, as this is the team that internationally everyone is extremely high on, and if anyone's going to actually upset LGD Gaming, everyone thinks it could be Unicorns of Love because of how hot they're coming into this. We've already talked about how obviously they're coming off of a perfect split, the only one of this year, which is noteworthy. They're joining a very elite club with that. They only had one loss throughout the whole summer season, that one loss being to Gambit in the finals, which is very frustrating, honestly, if you are a Unicorns of Love fan, that you had to lose one at the very, very end. And of course it's Gambit, because why not?
The Gambit
But-
fan in me is exceptionally sad, but there we go.
Oh, of course,
Oh,
you're disheartened as anything else. Gentlemen, Unicorns of Love. This is the third international invitation they've had. Obviously, they couldn't take their fourth one because no MSI. So
No.
this is the team that went to Worlds last year. This is the team that went to MSI, and both times almost
So close.
made it, losing a best of 5 twice, going the full 5 games. One time to Splice, the other time I can't quite remember.
C9, I think.
Or was it C9? This is the team which has a huge story. They were the best team in Russia before the Unicorns of Love couldn't make it into the LEC, so they were like, okay, we're just gonna buy the best roster and have promptly dominated the region since the CIS has been around.
It's either been them or Gambit, one of the two.
Yeah, pretty much.
So really, okay, what are V3's chances versus the Unicorns of Love?
Do you want to start this, Sam?
So let's lay down some context before we go too much further, because they have perfect splitted this region, and bluntly,
That's what I just said. Yeah.
yeah, exactly. But the point is, the thing being that outside of Gambit, there hasn't really been any competition towards them either.
Wait, they've actually been playing matches versus other teams.
Right. And that in some ways worries me a little bit, because say in the LJL, we've actually had a few teams who've gone, actually, these guys are a decent threat. You know, CGA, Sengoku Gaming, of course, DFM, all looked pretty good. Burning Core had their moments. You know, like, that's a fairly decent roster for
that definitely showed up,
yeah,
right?
Exactly. And there is a decent challenge to V3 to at least make sure they're getting sharpened by iron. Iron sharpens iron, that old Game of Thrones adage. But with the Unicorns of Love, they haven't really had that outside of Gambit. And they have absolutely, so some of these stats you've got to take with a grain of salt, is what I'm getting at here before I ramble too much further.
Totally agree with you, because that is something that has been a big problem when I've talked to other analysts. They're just like, well, we can't skill check Unicorns of Love right at the moment, right?
Mm-hmm. Yeah, and that's really tricky. Having said that, the eye test for certain players is pretty positive. No Man's in the mid lane is the one I am very excited to see. This guy has put up some absurd numbers. Most of the team has put up absurd numbers, but the likes, he's got a 9.1 CS per minute, 8.0 KDA. His DPM is 650. Like, those are fantastic numbers, no matter how well you're dominating. Like, this guy is fantastic. He's played nearly every champion under the sun. He's pulled a bit of an Aria this split. It feels like his most played champion is Kasten at 3 games. Everything else is at 2 or 1. Like, he just plays everything and anything, it feels like.
Yeah.
Nana, any other thoughts on the Unicorns of Love?
I think they're a ridiculously quick team comparative to, we're talking about PSG a bit slow. And if we go talk over about Team A, that's a similar problem with Team Liquid. If you look at the time in wins, the time they get Dragon Souls at, it's something like 23 to 25 minutes. It's
close to bang on the dot.
It's by far the quickest Dragon Soul time of any team at Worlds. It's frankly ridiculous. So it's not just the fact that they are dominating kills and gold. They're also getting a lot of neutral objectives too. But yeah, this is kind of pub stomping a region. That will always be hard to look at them and benchmark them and say, yeah, okay, maybe this isn't the problem. We know they're about here, or whatever, right? I remember last week on the podcast we were talking about okay, let's go check up some early game stats, and we did look at their early game stats and how they compared to V3, and they're good, don't get me wrong, but then you look at the first blood rate and it's not particularly high. V3 have a higher first blood rate in a split where they lost 4 or 5 games, 5 games, something like that. And on red side, like on blue side, V3 have like a 90% first blood rate, whereas UOL have more like a 67% or something like that. It's actually a pretty sizable difference when you look at all things said and done. The first tower rate's really high. The first herald rate's pretty high. The first dragon rate is kind of a bit all over the place sometimes. Depends against the team they're playing against. But I look at UOL and I'm like, are they as early game dominant as people are really painting them out to be when you put these stats into context?
Yeah.
And last time they've met any form of challenge or someone saying, no, we're not going to play the same way you're going to play, they've fallen, right?
Yeah, I wonder actually, I haven't done this myself, but I wonder whether it'd be interesting to like check their stats in only against like their top competition. So if you just take UOL stats versus Gambit, you just take V3 stats versus DFM, who's going to win out on those? Because I know the V3 obviously struggled. They had that 3-2 series, but it's not. I mean, Gambit should have won game 1 of their best of 5 finals versus them. They did win game 2. Games 3 and 4, yeah, okay, relatively UOL favored, but I think that would be much more interesting for me looking about, okay, when these teams were like really punished and really challenged, what were the stats more like then? What was, even though they were losing the game, what did they manage to cling on to and still manage to have an impact on the game on? Was it because obviously they're not just shutouts? So like, oh, did they get more kills at this point of the game? What did happen with top lane? What happened with first turret, first dragon, first herald? I think that'd be interesting to see.
So honestly, I'm personally giving V3 actually a 50-50 chance versus UOL. Like, partly because they haven't been limit tested properly, and also partly because I think Unicorns of Love and V3 are both these teams which just, well, are unknown quantities to a degree, except Unicorns of Love actually have previous almost success of getting into the group stage and starting to revitalize the region and prove that Albus Nox was not actually Lunas. That's
Albus
the
Nox
team.
Lunas,
Won a fluke. Yeah, they won a fluke back in 2016. This is an actual good region and which can actually bring out prime talent. Moscow 5 was not a fluke. It was actually, yeah.
I mean, CIS as a region, it's been a bit all over the place, because obviously Moscow 5 were the best team in the world for a period of Season 2. They were an incredible team. They changed the meta. Diamond and Prox, Alex Each, Genja, Edward, and then Darren as well. All 5 of those players had periods in the game where they revolutionized the game from their perspective. That kind of had that, it kind of sputtered out end of Season 2, because obviously they lost Season 2 World Championships, even though Season 2 World Championships kind of secondary to IPL 5 and all that kind of stuff. Then Season 3 happened and they were less of a factor, and then when the LCS came around, they weren't really so suited to a league format as opposed to an open tournament. You had Albus Nox leader in Season 6, don't get me wrong, really, really good showing, but like immediately after that, Gambit, I think they lost every game in the next Worlds they showed up in. They went like 0-4 in the playing stage, or in the international.
It was really sad.
It was really, really bad. Yeah. So then you're kind of questioning, well, how good is Russia anymore? So this will be an attempt to regain some of that lost glory. Of course, UOL and Gambit went to 5 games in previous playing stages versus some major regions teams. But this is probably their most realistic chance at getting to the group stage since the Albus Nox Luna time. So this is a team coming in absolutely fired up with a lot of history behind them.
Sam, do you have stats for us?
Yeah, I was just trying to get some actual. I've got like the comparisons up here, but I'm just trying to get the. I can't get the. Of course, typically I'm trying to find the vision, like the overall vision per minute and stuff. And it's just not that. I've got bars basically. Yeah, apparently so. Which is.
But what are your thoughts? Any other closing thoughts on Unicorns of Love coming into this? Any thoughts? Anything you've talked to people about?
So like some things are kind of like. Some things I've kind of noticed, like obviously again, it's so hard to call these guys. I think they are a good team. Don't get me wrong. I think No Man's looks brilliant.
I think we all think they are. Yeah.
I think a Nanasik is a very good jungler with a fairly varied champion pool. He has tended in the past more to things like Trundle, but he has been playing his Graves, his Nidalees, his Kha'Zixes. So that's a good sign as well to be into this meta where you sometimes have to be a bit more aggressive.
No Lilia.
And of course, yeah, like the likes of Gadget in the bot side is pretty good. No Lilia is a little bit of a concern. The other thing I will point out is that, you know, I'm looking at their vision score per minute. They are down 0.5 wards per minute on V3. They're down in vision wards per minute. They're down in wards clear per minute.
That's a stat that people were flaming V3 for.
Yeah, well, like exactly, like and that's true, and that's something where I'm saying, okay, these guys actually, how much of that, like they're not that vision dominant in a way that I think V3 use vision exceptionally well, and particularly saying like actually these guys are hard focused on getting themselves the early Drakes and early Drake control to get to those early soul points. That is a lot harder when you are losing out in vision games, or at least being contested more heavily.
And I think one of the ways you can get away with that is by having overly dominant side lanes. Don't necessarily think UOL have that either. I think Boss is not the guy to be running over and solo killing every laning phase like Peak Ebby has been. That is one of my worries about Paz if he comes up against a very dominant 1v1 top laner that plays a hell of a lot of Fiora or something like that. Things might end up getting a bit awkward. I don't think we have that in the laning in the playing stage. Really, I don't think any of the top laners, because I mean, I did a VOD review with Nightstar over on his channel of the LJL finals, and we had some thoughts about that. Ibris was there too, actually, thinking about it from the PCS guys. So one of the big takeaways was, okay, so they've covered another couple of the teams. None of the teams tend to play around the mid laners, so you're not going to see hard focus onto Ace. None of the teams particularly have lane punishing top laners either. So that's kind of, yeah, I think a lot of UL does revolve around Nanosec just kind of doing his thing.
Yeah, I mean, like, I will say, like, No Man's is very good and has got himself a lot of solo kills too. He's a very good player, so there is a world where he could do that. They've just generally
maybe UL are the team to break that mold, actually.
Yeah, and I will say, like, these guys are good, and the thing is, they are kind of bot side focused just in terms of, like, they want those Drakes. And there is a world where basically, you know, that is made difficult for them, but there's a world where they just do what they've been doing the whole split, and other teams, like, get collapsed on. Like, V3 have been very used to having a strong bot side. If Archer and Reiner are struggling with that, then maybe we see a rehash of what happened in games 1 and 2 of the finals versus DFM.
Definitely could be interesting. Quickly now, we must cover the idea that we don't quite know how they get there, but V3 are second place, meaning they will either play a third place team, or they got third or fourth, and then one of best of 5. It just happened. We don't know how it happened, but it got there. They could play against the second place team. So let's just go on the idea of second and third, rather. It's very difficult to predict third at the moment, but there's a general consensus if you just look at most people's pick'ems at the moment for play-ins that there is expectation that Mad Lions and or Team Lick will be first or second, depending on your biasty to a region.
So, I mean, would it be... So, I mean, regardless of whether we're second, third, or fourth, we're going to be playing against a clump of teams, like either one of the second through fourth of the other region, other group, rather. So I guess we could just... Do you guys want to, like, have a guess at what first and last are going to be, then just talk about the remaining 3? Just to be time efficient.
I'm assuming Mad and Legacy... Mad's going to be the top one, and Legacy looks a little bit out of the blue at the moment, sadly.
I wonder if INCZ are going to be last, but it's between them and Legacy for me. And not to upset any OCE fans, I do think that it's a strong group A. I mean, you didn't get the strongest Pool 1 team in LGD, don't get me wrong, but I think that having Team Liquid and Mad
is pretty close.
It is pretty awkward. I mean, the average of the Pool 1 teams is higher than PSG with the crappy roster issues and LGD, so I think you're not going to easily take games off of them. So then it's like, okay, who's going to make it out on top of, like, the... I think Supermassive have a chance of upset versus those two teams, actually. Yeah. I think they're actually quite a solid team.
I think Supermassive, like, I think Cacao is still very
Cacao's
good.
their jungler, famous.
I think he was a little bit hard... I think he was a bit hard in his luck, actually, to get kicked out of the team that he boosted into the LCK
Prince,
when they came.
Yeah.
Oh, hugely.
Yeah, he did. Like, I think that was a bit rough for him. Of course, he's still, a very good player. Zeitnot and Snowflower are a hell of a
Snowflower's another Korean export.
Yeah,
really good player.
So, that is a team that is very, very strong. I still expect, the likes of Liquid and Mad to be number 1 and 2 in some way.
Actually, guys, support is stacked in play-ins. Support is super stacked. There's Kaiser from Mad, Core JJ, there's Snowflower,
Kaiwing
from PSG who's still there.
Reiner?
You've got Reiner as well. Like, holy crap, that's a hell of a lot of good support.
I mean, Mark is actually also someone I really quite rate from the LG, for LGD.
Oh, yeah.
I think I've heard good things about Isles as well, though
I don't know them so well. But...
I've not really looked at Legacy yet. I really haven't, so I'm behind on that. It's kind of one of my next ones to look through, so I don't want to call these guys out too much, but I expect probably of historical stuff to be 4th or 5th, but that I've been told pretty strongly by the likes of Everyday and a few of the other guys that we know and talk to that these guys are legit, and maybe we should be more afraid of them. So I'll reserve judgment.
But they're not as big on V3 as they should be if they're our sister region. So
we got I see. Return the favor, right? I see.
Yeah, exactly. If they're high on V3, we'll be high on Legacy. But if they're not going to be as high on V3, then
sounds like great analysts.
I think there's a similar issue with OCE to LJL is that OCE have just sucked internationally. I know that some it's like, oh well, OCE, what about them compared to Turkey? Well, OCE has always kicked the bucket very early on into the competition. They've had a couple of good games, but honestly, they've never had results stick.
Unfortunately.
I mean, you had Pabu in All-Star winning the 1v1 tournament. That's probably the biggest result they've got in recent years.
That is.
Which is actually a pretty big result. Actually, no taken away from that. Winning a 1v1 tournament versus the world's best players is absolutely no joke. Yeah, I still not big hopes for Legacy though. I haven't. I mean, I got pinged by someone once so I get pinged basically whenever Ari is played in competitive because I'm a filthy degenerate Ari main. And one of them was literally someone using Ari to beat Legacy, and I'm like, well, if you're losing against Ari, what kind of a team are you? So yeah.
DR1 sends his regards over in the VCS.
Oh god. Oh god. Okay, so do we think we can ever beat Liquid in a best of 5? Because I think we can.
Yeah, definitely a world.
It's
Broxer versus Boogie.
Yeah, no, I think that's a big thing, right? I think Brox is too slow in a lot of regards, and I think that I do think Core JJ and Tactical may
That's fucked.
be.
That's hard.
It's hard. I think Tactical being rookie to Worlds gonna be a bit awkward.
So is Archer.
That's the thing, right? So and besides Reina, right? I think Archer and Reina being rookies might upset them, but then again, you're not playing in front of crowds, so there's a lot of factors going on there. Because we know that we talked about it in previous podcasts with V3 in spring. We had questions about whether they mental boomed a bit during spring playoffs. That's just assumptions and whatever, but they didn't really turn up on some of the big games for the playoff series. And then also, Impact just has a habit of crushing tank v tank matchups. If he plays Shen into Paz's Ornn or something, that's going to go really, really badly. So I hope that V3 do their homework. And not put Paz on Ornn versus Shen and get him absolutely dunked on again like Ebby did, because I think Impact is going to be like Ebby but worse. I think that's one of the few players in the world which you can actually say that about. But I think that mid-jungle might actually go pretty well for V3 because Ace and Boogie tend to be active on the map much, much earlier than Jensen and Broxer.
Yeah. I'll say as well that like Liquid are one of those teams like we'll stay relatively quiet until there's an objective fight and then we start playing around. At that point, V3 have already done weird things with the map.
Yeah.
I'll say that if Mad Lions are the second place team, which is always a possibility when they play the kind of varied style they do, there is a world where Shadow just picks Lee Sin and ruins somebody's day, or picks up Hecarim and ruins somebody's day, and
but there's a chance that Boogie picks up Echo and ruins somebody's
day. Exactly.
There's a chance he picks Evelyn and ruins somebody's day.
Yeah, exactly. And like that's the deal, right? That Mad Lions are probably deservedly EU's 4th seed. They kind of fell off towards the end of summer, and part of that was
very true.
More inconsistency in some of their weird fights they were picking early on. Teams caught up. Some of their weird picks weren't so weird anymore. But, they've still got one of the best playmaking supports in the whole damn world as far as I'm concerned.
And Shadow is terrifying.
I think it's brilliant. And Shadow is terrifying. Humanoid still ints occasionally. He does roll those natural ones if we're running the D&D references the LEC have been doing all year. I would still think that Mad would be a harder matchup for V3 because if someone was going to match the interesting plans of V3 in the early game, it would be Mad.
Yeah. No, I think that's fair. I think Mad Lions are honestly the scariest team in Group A in my eyes, due to partly the dominance that they did have during most of the summer split. And yes, playoffs fell pretty hard from grace for them, but if they can they can recapture it pretty quickly. It could be kind of terrifying for anyone in that Group A roster part.
I think you're kind of right there, Lexi. I think I will end that caveat from, or at least on my end, where I think that Mad are a good team, but they are inconsistent, and they have shown that inconsistency towards the end of it. And there is that kind of element. They've got very high highs, but they've also got some fairly disappointing lows. And that can hurt in best of ones. It really can. Like, they could just drop a really dumb game to someone they could never.
So then the question is, bring it back around to V3 versus a team from Group A. What are the three-ish teams, four-ish teams that we think we're likely to face?
Well, I think Supermassive and Liquid are 2 of them, and then it's kind of a toss-up, honestly, between INT, or Mad Lions. I don't know enough about Legacy. It could genuinely be Legacy Esports as the 3rd one. It could be INT. I don't know. I'm assuming Mad's also going to just be first in a lot of my scenarios, and from what I've seen on analysts, and everyone's assuming Mad are just going to slap everyone around.
I don't know how
so there's at least
work. If it's head to head on the best of one single way, I think probably Mad has the likelihood to. I actually do. Actually,
I
no,
don't know if it's done on game time, if they play a tiebreaker match
Okay.
or anything. I honestly don't know.
I actually
We'll
think
have to see how it
the
comes
Mad TL match, I could see going different ways. Really, really. Because, I mean,
Yeah.
again, all
'Cause
the
there's a
NA
lot
teams
of
went to,
veteran
all the
shit.
NA representatives went to 5 games against each other. They're actually pretty close.
But then what does that say about the region?
What does that say about the region, of course? I think that TL has some huge systematic errors, but it's a best of one, and they do have solid laners. They do. I think Impact and Jensen... I think particularly Impact versus Arome in TL versus Mad... Again, sometimes Impact at Worlds just craps on people. Remember, these guys took a game off of Damwon in groups last year. Like, they're no joke when they turn up. It's just making sure they consistently do that through a tournament.
And I just think that Liquid are, in the end, a lot of very talented veterans, and those veterans can bring magic. Like, Core JJ, you know, like, even though we say, yeah, Liquid are a bit slow, yeah, but then there's also Core JJ who just picks Blitzcrank, pulls people, you know, and destroys Luxes, you know, picked into him. And Rakani, like, that kind of thing where he has these bits of magic to him. Impact's teleports always come to mind as well. It's like, why is this guy ended up here? Like, there is that world.
You know what gives me hope? Guess what DFM were playing like in the finals? They were playing engaged supports with teleport top laners. Actually, DFM
there was a lot of shit.
DFM actually played quite a TL style in the finals.
They did.
Yeah, and it just didn't seem to matter when V3 realized how to change up their draft after in the best of 5. They were able to adapt in the best of 5 after getting the first win and then going 0-2. Backs against the wall. They're like, yeah, and then everything we've been hearing, V3 seemed very relaxed about that, relatively speaking. And
I'm still of the opinion, game 2, they just let Leona through to see if they could. They lost, and they're like, okay, whatever. I genuinely think that 3-2 in the finals for V3, it's better than it seems, because actually they were trying stuff out in game 2.
Oh, yeah, 100%. I do believe that they were definitely testing stuff, the pick and ban phase, the reliance on that. And also how flexible are DFM in their draft phase. Turned out at that point in time, not super flexible.
It's Nico Azir, take it or leave it.
Exactly, right? And the Azir was there, so anyway. So, gentlemen, what are your opinions percentage-wise that V3 actually go the distance? How small or large of a percentage chance? I'm willing to actually give V3 Esports, honestly, because there is a chance that 3 teams from one group can make it through. I'm giving V3 a 50% chance.
I'm trying to figure out where my percentages lie, because my first percentage comes from, okay, what's our score in the best of 1 round robin? I think there's a chance we do get 3rd or 4th. I think there's a chance we get 2nd or 1st. And then I'm like, okay, let's add up all these eventualities and then up with an overall percentage. I think it's like a 10% chance we end up 4-0. Like, it's not high. Because there is way too many coin flips involved.
So for me, honestly, I've just gone 100% chance that we always make it to the knockout stage. Because I think if we don't make it there,
it's low.
Yeah.
Oh, I'm giving 100 just to make it easier for me, really.
Yeah. Easier on the heart.
Yeah.
Yeah, I think that's fair. I think, I agree with. But the thing is, it's basically, if I'm assuming 3rd, I think that's the safest bet. Then against UOL, which I think is probably 50-50, shall we say?
Well, you're against. No, you're probably not.
You're probably against. Are you against Rainbow Seven or
PSG?
Talon.
I can do PSG. Okay. Which I think is probably fair. I think that that is we are a stronger team, so I think that's probably a 80% chance. That's pretty good. Then you're against Liquid or Mad. Liquid of a lot of veterans.
Or Supermassive.
Or Supermassive. Again, I'm just going off the most likely runs here. And I think the chances against, say, those guys are significantly lower, just because they are, generally speaking, teams with more experience, teams from better regions. So at which point maybe.
Well, they're thought of
45, exactly 45% if I'm being general, should we say?
Sure.
At which point I think I'd probably say you've got 2 best of 5s against tough opposition. I'd say like 35% chance that V3 make groups.
But then there's also the added percentage of, like, the 2nd and 1st place ad stuff on there. So if you bump that out a bit, I guess on Sam's point of view, it's more like 40-45% if you add up all eventualities.
Yeah. So it's a well.
What do I think?
We're almost on a coin flip here,
I
lads.
can't call it. I don't want to call it a coin flip. So I don't necessarily think it is. I think there's a lot of teams in this.
Well, I actually do. I actually genuinely believe there's a world where V3 10%, 15% their way, and they just upset LGD. They just run the gauntlet and they 4-0, which just means it's free real estate. I think there's also a lot of the time when they're second. If they get second, obviously it's big if. If they do, there's a chance they get to play against such a weaker team from Group A. Like Supermassive, like INT, like even Legacy. I think that's a great spot for us to be in as a second place team.
Oh, yeah.
I think the worst
if we go against them in a best of 5, we're going to crush them, I think.
Yeah, and that's why I think it's really actually a coin flip, because if we do get that second place, oh boy, we've almost locked ourselves into Worlds groups again.
You know what? If V3 had a sports psychologist with them, I'd give him it. I'd say, yeah, you're probably getting through. But I think it's not really a massive thing in Japanese culture. It's more like a community team camaraderie. But...
They do have a sports psychologist.
Okay.
Do they?
They do. And I was wondering who the extra members in the group photos were. They've got Khaled. He's a sports psychologist on the wiki.
DJ Khaled, he's there. Another one.
Actually he is.
Got another role.
That's actually pretty important. Actually, I didn't quite realize that. I didn't.
That's new. That's new.
When did he come in?
I don't know. Yeah. That's new. I'm checking the global contract database now because that's probably something on there.
Maybe.
Anyway, continue what your thoughts were.
I just think that when you're dealing with so many new players to the international stage, as a region which is going to be undervalued, as against teams which have a huge following, which will have much more social media presence, there's a chance that V3 don't come in confident, and I think confidence of these teams is going to be so huge. If UOL come in and just outplay the fuck out of everyone, then yeah, you're probably not getting second. But if V3 come in and are really calm and collected, they've had a great time in solo queue, all the members are really high on life and all that other stuff, we can be that team as well. I think it is a coin flip whether we get out. All things said and done, it's close enough to a coin flip for me to call that. Because I think second is an outside chance, but a chance. Well, not an outside chance. I think that second and third are kind of like in the balance. It's between them for me. It will depend on literally a single best of one, probably, for my eyes. I think if you get second, obviously you got a much easier way through. If you're against TL in a best of 5, it's difficult. It's difficult, but again, I think you can probably put that down to quite an even chance as well, because I think that V3 tend to understand their drafts better, whereas NA have had real issues with understanding their drafts. Massively so. It's why TSM have gotten so far. They actually, towards the end of the split, they just understood what they were going to do as a team, finally. Whereas Liquid, kind of a bit all over the place. FlyQuest sometimes the same too. So I think that V3 can have a strategic advantage versus them. So yeah, and this might be, someone listening into this who has had no experience with the LGL, has seen what other people have written on social media about the LGL, might say, oh, what are you on about? Go.
This is where we're going into next, so we can transition into this.
Yeah.
Go for it.
But you guys have to do your homework. You have to look at how V3 absolutely dominated this region from the regular split. Look at how they did against Sengoku in the semifinals when they were winning handily versus them too. This team actually understands what it does, what it needs to do to win a lot of the time. Even when they've outdrafted themselves, they tend to be the better team. They are a team to be contended with. Don't write them off. Not yet.
No, V3 have definitely been the team that actually have also a very interesting story. I mean, there's been a few articles done with Paz that we've already started to bring up, where he actually covers that this was a roster that was planned from spring and it wasn't meant to start popping off till summer. There was this chance that they might be there, and we saw that run in spring. They got third place, which, frankly, for V3, pretty good showing, especially as when we came into summer, we were like, well, I don't know quite how V3 are going to turn up. They either they'll really turn on or and then they started turning up. And then they really turned up. And then they upset Sengoku Gaming. And then the narrative that was going with Sengoku is just like, this is the team that was meant to be going to Worlds to replace Destination Focus Me. They didn't do that. DFM ended up returning back into the finals. And then V3 went, we're going to try things in our pick and ban phase because we're this confident. So, gentlemen, what have we been seeing on social media? What have we been seeing in articles? And what do we want to... not dispute, but correct?
Seen a lot of people who haven't done their homework, Lexi. Seen a lot of people who haven't reached out to regional experts or people who might have covered the region in some regard. That's what I've been seeing, Lexi.
And we're not just talking about ourselves. There are obviously multiple other people.
No, I'm not quite that. Not quite that audacious yet.
No, I mean there are people like Ishiki who has done articles around the LJL that is perfectly knowledgeable on certain teams. There's Joshi, Maple Street. There's loads of people that have been around the region and are relative experts, and well, sadly, social media seems to have forgotten about and ignored. And part of it is also, I think, the Japanese community don't outreach outside of Japan. A lot of the things we've been finding, which will be in the show notes, are mostly just Japanese websites we're using Google Translate on or whatever, and just trying to figure out what's going on.
Yeah, and I think a lot of it is also the fact that there aren't many Japanese fluent league experts to get a lot of inside information and know about the ecosystem of the coaches there. Because Korea is the best, well, has traditionally been the best region in the world, is quite a multicultural, well, an international place. Seoul is very expat heavy, and there are a lot of people who have moved and worked out in Korea for a very long time. It's very ingrained into the ecosystem of league now. LJL just doesn't have that. It's not really a hot spot for Western League personalities, broadcasts, or anything. So really, the kind of the ecosystem there is just not exported at all. So this could be the big chance to do so.
Like, I mean, I'll be honest. I've seen social media. People are predicting V3 to be the worst team.
Yep, I've seen
that's been a general consensus. If you look at the top, all 10 teams together, they're normally put between 10th. I've seen them actually in 10th a few times. But as high as about 6th. And that's pretty much it. There's a high prediction that they're actually going to be like the worst team in their group.
I've been arguing with people on Reddit who say they're going to be 0-4. Well, I don't know. No, I've not been... Okay, I have been arguing. But the way I've been doing it has been asking them pointed questions like, oh, so you think this? Why? For instance, like, these guys are such a slow team. Like, oh, but what do you think of like X, Y, and Z games where they played really fast and managed to close out the game really cleanly? Oh, have you considered that actually they're playing slowly because this composition needs to be played slow and they've been using that very well? So I think that there are some people who are looking at the base stats on GOL and being like, these guys are too slow.
Why is this a
in
problem?
play-ins. I don't really like this Ryanair guy's vision score per minute. And like we're sat here tearing our hair out like, guys, just ask us about which games are important. Go, if you want examples of them failing or succeeding in certain ways, come ask us. We know this shit.
We covered every single game of League of Legends in the LJL.
Yep. We did. I mean, like I mean, like, let's be fair. Like, there is a historical precedent, and people have, like, there are other teams which people are going to prioritize looking at. You know, the likes of LGD, the likes
Unicorns of Love,
Talon, Unicorns of Love come in with a lot of history to them. LATAM has a big fan base, frankly, particularly in the States. You know, it's
far bigger than LJL.
Yeah. Well, at least within the English speak, at least within the English speaking diaspora.
Yeah.
And actually, I'm sort of thinking, like, actually, you know, things like Ryan's vision score is like, well, that's because the team's vision score is significantly higher. They work together very well to do wards, and it's not so reliant on one player carrying the bulk of the vision score work. That kind of thing. So yeah, I've been looking at a lot of the analytical takes, and honestly, they haven't felt all that analysis heavy, which has been a little frustrating. I think some people who've gone and done the VOD reviews have come back and given me some more interesting thoughts. I know, like, you obviously sat down with Ibris Al. I know Amazing's been doing some stuff. I know Yamato Cannon has his own thoughts on V3 and thinks they're pretty decent. You know, like, and I do think people are going to be sleeping on this team. I really do.
I think one of the big takeaways that people have had when they have done the research into V3 is that they don't have the lack of mechanical talent you sometimes see out of wildcard regions. Between Archer and Boogie in solo queue, and then also Ace reaching Challenger as well recently.
Reiner and stuff,
You know, they actually have a pretty solid team mechanically, at least in their solo. So the thing is, though, actually, most of the time when you do get exposed to these teams firsthand and you have your own anecdotes with them, particularly as a team that's not within your Scrim ecosphere and stuff like that, is when are you seeing them in solo queue? Are you even seeing them in solo queue if they're not at a high enough rank? Obviously, these guys are, and you know, if they are playing on Korean solo queue, someone like Yamato, who coaches for Sandbox, probably would have seen them. And he's had pretty decent opinion of them, says, hey, these guys are actually pretty legit. Amazing tweeted out earlier today. And of course, you know, you can say what you want about these guys' opinions. Maybe you don't, maybe you're not on the same wavelength as them on analysts, but there are multiple people chiming in on that same opinion, like, oh, this guy's pretty good. Hey, maybe you should look out on these guys. Mechanically, they're looking pretty good.
Yeah, I mean, I honestly think it's just a lack of information out there that is readily available in a context that people in the English-speaking world are willing to consume. And maybe maybe, gentlemen, that is something that will fall on us to have to pick up the pieces. We are already doing the broadcast and everything, and maybe more content is required or something. I don't know. We might need some help in that one, but we'll figure it out as we go on. I don't know. For me, it's just, yeah, I think you summed it up perfectly, Alex, when you say ripping my hair out, because I've genuinely been ranting to my girlfriend about, like, people just don't understand how good these players are. They're just doing so good. They do so many different things, and people are just missing it.
I don't mind if people look at the games, look at them, have their own objective take, and say, actually, I think these guys are kind of bad. I don't mind that, but at least do the homework, guys. And if you want pointers towards the games which have proven to us, really, whether these guys are good or bad, sure, I mean, come ask us. We're more than willing to do that. I mean, a guy tentatively reached out to me on DMs, and I, like, bombarded him with, like, 3 pages worth of notes on V3. I can do that. I have this shit saved. If you want to know more about V3 and our more correlated thoughts on them, we have them in written format too, not just in podcast. So, yeah, we've got that info. If you want to have the more nuanced takes and be like, oh, so what about their vision control and stuff like that? Ryan has got a really bad vision score per minute compared to all the other supports. Well, how about you look at this game and how they just ran over this game with vision control? It's not necessarily in the stats.
Yeah, and that's the thing, right? The stats only tell so much of a story, right? So, I mean, it's been interesting looking through some articles that have been published.
Yes.
Where they quite clearly are going on a wiki. They're watching a few games. Honestly, I've seen people on Twitter that are like analysts and coaches, like genuine people. I go on their Twitch stream to watch their VOD review. They watch about 2.5 games at double times the speed, and then they make their assumption on V3 after they look at the Goal Esports, Game of Legends, and the wiki, and they're like, "Yep, I know where they're going to sit. They're going to be last place or fourth place." And it's like, yeah. You're missing things. Sengoku won spring apparently, so that's a thing.
Yeah, we gotta change our Esportspedia page, guys. It's news to me. Well, I mean, we at the time we did kind of say, Sengoku kind of won spring, and then the patch change happened. We kind of said that, but it doesn't actually count, guys.
Yeah, and that was us talking on our podcast. You're not meant to take this as the facts, anybody. Like, this is just us spitballing some conversation. Like, that's where it falls down. It's been a little bit frustrating. Some of the analysis, though, has actually been really enlightening. It's been really good to see some conversation around it. I've definitely personally seen on the internet, not just us in our echo chamber of V3 are good. It's also been other analysts who have watched some stuff, and they're like, there's a chance that this group do something. I have no idea, as I've not followed it for a full year, but I would at least not count them out.
Yeah, I mean, I don't think any team from play-ins besides LGD is going to make it out of groups. But that doesn't mean that play-ins can't be interesting, and there is a good chance one of these Pool 1 teams gets knocked out in play-ins. Maybe even 2. We'll see, right? Depends how good, like, UOL and V3 are comparative to all the stuff. But there
is the crazy world, remember, gentlemen, where UOL and V3 are first and second teams. LGD gets completely, like, 2-2, and then just stomp through the rest of the teams. They actually figure it out afterwards. Like, crazy things happen in best of 1 environments.
Particularly because UOL is a snowball team and V3 do weird stuff in regards to, like, Aphelios lane swaps. No one else really plays Aphelios, not in a good composition.
People don't seem to understand the Aphelios lane swap, Nightmare. You might need to give some knowledge on that.
There was another blog somewhere which saying, I don't know why V3 keep picking Aphelios. I guess it's one of Archer's best champions. Maybe that's why they keep going to it. Obviously, they haven't watched the games where they kept playing Aphelios. V3 only play Aphelios when they lane swap him nowadays. They have a really, really clean way to do it, too. We talked about it last podcast episode. Game 5 versus DFM in the finals, and first game versus Sengoku in the semifinals. V3 set up a team composition with a Lilia Scion, which means they have a huge team fight engage where they just keep chucking out swell seeds, wait for the Lilia ult, and Scion ult right on top of their ass, because it does a lot of damage. And then Aphelios also gets to escape laning phase, gets into a weak lane, gets turret plates, free farm, starts with a cull, has teleport, has an aftershock support so they can dive towers really easily. So it's Aphelios for free farm, a Scion that wave clears better than the other top laners, so they're going to get more ahead, a power farming jungler which clears through and is always on the map, and also mid lane is isolated, so Ace doesn't need to worry about random crap happening in his lane. Really good for V3. It's why V3 keep picking Aphelios, and it turns out no one's done the homework. So this one blog, I'm calling you out.
And I think that that's kind of part of the deal, which kind of raises my eyebrows. Is like
very nice, Alex.
People are kind of not looking at. They're looking at things like stats to assume how V3 play, and like not picking up on things about like the very precise, very macro heavy exploits they tried to pull off in the early game. The way they split jungles, the way they play around early jungle invades and abusing jungle pathing, the way they play around lane swaps, as we were saying.
Responding to dives is a big one too.
Yeah, exactly. And the fact they are being cleaner lane swaps than the likes we saw at SK in the EU as well. Like, that is good signs on a fundamentals level, not necessarily mechanics per se, but like the fundamentals of macro gameplay, particularly in those first 10-12 minutes, are very strong for V3 in a way that I sometimes think the likes of perhaps say unicorns, or maybe Liquid might be a good call, who just want stability. Rainbow Seven have been a little bit like that. PSG Talon have been a bit like that, where they're not doing anything crazy in the early game because their whole deal is mitigating until they're at a point where they can just team fight their way out and stuff.
Yeah, I think that's fair.
V3 don't do that as much. I mean, sometimes they have got their weaknesses, don't get me wrong. Like, Ace's laning stats have not been insane. Paz similarly is down, a CS per minute generally to most of the other top laners in the group. Like, those aren't amazing things, but if you look... If you take those out of context, you might go, oh, this is a bit problematic. And in some ways it could be. But it very rarely devolves into just straight laning for V3.
Yeah, Ace's CS per minute in the semi finals is something like 6.7, which is like, oh, dude. But then you realize, like, he's been playing Karma and then just giving the rest of his farm after 2 items to his jungler, and then just roaming somewhere else. He's just not in fucking lane. Where is he? Not there.
Yeah, or sometimes he's like, oh, bot lane, you take this, I'm just going to go sit bot lane, just get this turret down, and then we'll go and rotate around Dragon. And then the enemy team are like, where's our mid turret just suddenly disappeared to? Why are there 4 people mid? Why is Ace a bot? Oh, because he's Galio. Oh no, he's just ulting in, we just lost our team fight. And it's just over and over again from V3.
Yeah. And I think another big thing, which, I mean, this might be a bit of another point, but... okay, this is actually going to be a little bit of a tangent, because I just thought of it myself and didn't bother to put it in the notes or anything. But think also about the geography of worlds. It's in China, and people can keep playing on the Korean server. People can keep playing pretty close to home if you're in the LJL. Okay. So the LJL will probably be closer to all of their setup and the teams which they have been scrimming with internationally, like the VCS teams, anyone that's scrimming from Korea that they're in contact with. If you've got someone coming over from Russia or EU or whatever, I'm sure they'll have contacts, but this is much closer to home for the LJL, so I reckon V3 have got a better practice schedule cooked up, well, have the potential to have a better practice schedule cooked up for them, particularly because we already know that some of the Korean imports from the LJL were already boot camping with them, like likes of Arya. Another Korean top laner was playing with them, a Korean top laner was playing with them, which wasn't in the LJL. So I reckon that, obviously, V3 are probably practicing relatively well, and that's shown up in their solo queue stats, if you want to segue onto that at some point, too.
Yeah, sure. I was going to go EU Masters first before we go solo.
Oh, sorry, we can do that if you want.
Yeah.
Do you want to do it? All right, let's do EU Masters as a brief check-in to prep us for Worlds and everything.
My bad.
Yeah, no, it's all right. It's all right, because it's just the EU Masters stuff. It leads us into that stuff. So to end with EU Masters would feel a little bit weird for me personally.
Very true. Very true.
We're not the EU Master podcast. We are the LJL. Even though we are 3 Brits, none of the English teams did particularly well at EU Masters, so we don't have to bother too much about it. Fnatic Rising did sadly not rise very hard.
They had the sad thing of Magi Felix being taken as Fnatic sub halfway through the tournament, and
yeah,
so they lost their mid laner.
That might have fucked us up a bit.
That wasn't fun.
I actually wonder if Fnatic are going to play some games with Magi Felix. Actually, I wonder.
Maybe. It depends how Nemesis.
We'll discuss that in a moment. But let's stay on EU Masters. I'm just going to keep whipping you both back over to EU Masters. Don't worry. Big stories that came out from EU Masters is Caitlyn is still really, 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 really powerful. The rise of Akali and Lucian that we've all been expecting over the last few patches has now well and truly secured itself. This was played on the Worlds patch. For any listeners who's not quite sure, this is why.
Right. Oh yeah, you're right.
Yeah, it was 10-19, so like there was super up-to-date stuff. That's why it's relevant for this. Ornn is still good, Shen is good, Renekton's good, Camille is good, Gangplank's good, Sion's good. Wait a second, all these champions I just said is already in Paz's wheelhouse. Huh, that's funny, gentlemen. It's almost like this is the perfect patch for Paz. Huh.
Yeah.
I think the interesting one for me has been looking in a little bit at the jungle pool.
Because we can transition.
Because absolutely those things for like Paz is very, very true, and that is fantastic. And things like Shen as well being a little bit of a flex right now as well raises a few of my eyebrows. But looking at the jungle pool, it's huge. I mean, the things that are viable, like at the top of the list, Graves and Nidalee, Hecarim, Set, still way up there. But then you look at a list of things like between 18 and like Volibear's there, Skarner. of all things, is up there with 14 games played across EU Masters, which is a bit of an interesting one. Might be seeing a bit of Scar there. Lee Sin's still up there. Kazik's still up there. We know Lilia is good. Sejuani's good. Kindred's not bad. And I think sometimes as well, it's like, that is a vast jungle pool. The question is more about what does your jungler play and what does your team play well around? Because obviously what I didn't mention there was something like Evelynn, right? Where you kind of have to be both an Evelynn player and good at her, and also have a team that's willing to play around a jungler that just needs to blow people up and is less about kind of being a frontline or straight engage. And, you know, like, I suspect most junglers will have to play something like Graves Nidalee. Probably have to have at least looked in at Hecarim and Lilia just because of where they're at in their power rank.
Oh, I think if you can't play Lilia to a high level, you're just inting for your team. I'm sorry.
I think it's been more of the teams in the East that have been looking towards it, but I completely agree. I think Lilia has been a little overlooked by a lot of Western teams. But I do think, you know, people like Selfmade are going to be very happy to pull out Evelynn, and that's going to force hand because other teams just aren't willing to play around that. And that could be interesting as well. So this is one of those things where, like, normally you've kind of, how many worlds have we gone to? It's like, yeah, there's 3 junglers and maybe some other weird ones of people out there, but like the triumvirate of what, for how many years was it? Lee Sin, Rek'Sai, and Elise, like over and over and over again, or Gragas maybe replaces one of them. That's going to be very much less the case this year, I think.
Yeah, I mean, the jungle pool looks wide as anything. If you're a jungler and you're a team, you can pretty much build and pick any jungler that really fits into your lineup, which, as we've seen throughout most of summer, which is just a continuation, actually, of summer, the summer packs that we had and solidified on. Play around your jungler, or don't play around your jungler at all and find a jungler that fits around what you want to do as a comp, because there's so many flexible junglers that can do pretty much anything. You just have to pick the right one for what you're doing. There's a lot of slots you can do it in, and you can have them as your carry, as we see with Boogie sometimes, or you can have Boogie on Trundle duty, and you can still do other things.
Yeah, and I think that's the big thing, is that Boogie's always had a larger champion pool than is necessary. It just allows him to pivot so much. I guess one of one of the annoying things for me is that in game 2 versus DFM, they ended up playing... Oh, was it game 3? They played a Lee Sin game in a comp where I was like, guys, why are you playing Lee Sin? Boogie plays everything. Don't pick Lee Sin at this point. That's one thing which I was a little bit annoyed from V3's perspective. But yeah, I think that if you're a team with a jungler which is flexible, that is really, really big coming into play-ins on this patch.
So, gentlemen, then, we have to go over to the mid lane and, sorry, not spoiling anything that we've seen in solo queue, okay? We're not spoiling, gentlemen. Coming into this blind, Orianna's most played, then Lucian, then Sylas, and then we finally see a champion that we know Ace can play in the Syndra. He's played a Kali, I believe, before. Then there's the beloved Galio, which, honestly, that's the one champion. If Ace and V3 get Galios, because people just don't respect it enough. Free will real estate. Like, we just win games through that when that guy gets his best champion.
I mean, I think there are a lot of picks from the regular season which is still fine in mid lane, particularly because I know that I mean, set mid lane still fine. Still more than fine, really. I mean, and the thing about that is also remember the difference between solo queue and competitive is that these are flex picks. They gain value in competitive, because even though they might not be best in role, if you can use it to pivot in a draft to get yourself an advantageous matchup somewhere else, or a composition advantage somewhere, then it's absolutely worth it, even if it's not necessarily best in class.
Yeah, 100%. I think that's going to be, well, at least something Ace can reliably have. He's still got his Zoe that he can bring out. He can still play the LeBlanc. And I mean, crazy things where we saw Ace once play that Nocturne mid, and it worked gorgeously. Yeah. There are crazy things which V3 can bring out, and they've definitely taken at least a look in at what Rascal Jester was doing, and took inspiration. In a good way. In a good way.
Yes.
In a good... Not the crashing down
crazy energy.
Back. Yeah. Bot lane looks brilliant for us. Also, honestly, Ashe, Ezreal, Jhin, Senna, Caitlyn.
All of the AD carries that are here at the minute. Like, if they don't play those champions, you're not getting to work.
Senna's been heavily nerfed on patch 10.19.
Hugely.
For ADC Senna anyway. So, soul drop from minions you killed has dropped from like 8-point-something% down to like 4-point-something%. So that means that as opposed to getting about a minion per wave or whatever it was, a soul per wave or whatever it was from last patch, now it's like every 2 waves. So instead of getting about, because it's about 2 waves a minute, so at 10 minutes you'd expect 20-ish souls from a Senna. Now it's more like 10. And that's it from minions. Then
That's a
obviously from
big
trading, you'd probably expect like another 5, maybe not. Yeah, 5 in 10 minutes. Yeah, 5, another 5, 10. It's almost halved. It's not quite as badly, but it's still a huge amount because it means that you don't get that extra range, the extra damage, the extra everything. So yeah,
It
Senna
takes a lot
ADC is
longer
just,
to hit those critical mass.
yeah, and particularly when you're against tanks and you're trying to not get outstatted at a certain point in the game where you just can't kill tanks like a Scion, which Paz plays, then yeah, I think Senna is very risky to pick unless you know the full composition now.
And that's just it with like something like a Senna as well. Like she starts the early game being relatively utility heavy, and then once you hit that 70 CS mark, like there is the kind of like the red light turns on. Oh my, one more Shindaru comes out. Like she's like, and now I hit like a truck. Like because for there is that kind of she's a fairly strong laner because she can bully with piercing darkness and stuff.
Yeah, Senna's Q is an unfair laning ability. It's disgusting.
Yeah, it's really nasty. But then that just kind of hits that mid-game space where Senna kind of is a bit quiet. There is good utility, but not really a carry threat unless she's like hard snowballed. And then you hit about 30 minutes and it's 70 souls in, and then you're scared. The fact that's delayed even further, and that mid-game drop-off is kind of, or that mid-game quiet utility space is even more on the utility end, I think really hurt.
Yeah,
At least it's an AD carry threat.
I think that's fair. I mean, thankfully, it's not a champion that Archer brought out to huge amount. I recall. I think he only played
summer. He did in spring.
Yeah.
Did in spring.
Yeah, but when she started getting a few nerfs, he almost immediately jumped ship and was like, "I'm going to play anything but that champion because I don't like that champion." And then guess what? He didn't do a double lift and get really good at it. He got really good at the meta stuff, and then it got nerfed harder, and he's looking like great. So that's good. And the support, honestly, hasn't really changed between when we last saw V3 to where it is now. Reiner's whole support lineup of everything is still there. According to the EU Masters, nothing's really changed.
Yeah, I think that every support is going to be playing a load of Thresh still, load of Nautilus. I think that you can play Zyra Khan. I think that'll be coming back to a certain extent. It depends what weird stuff people are going to pick up. Are we going to see Taric compositions? I think we can in some games.
Yeah.
Well, yeah.
Taric saw a bit of play in EU Masters. I mean, Gragas support saw a little bit. Pantheon saw a tiny bit. Leona was like the second or third most support played, which is something we only started seeing till the finals, really. And we've already seen that V3 are already adapting around that.
Yeah,
exactly.
I think regardless, I think V3's 2v2, just the synergy they have between the members, very, very useful. And I think that also we have to talk about Kalista too, because Kalista's a pretty big one. I mean, Sam and I mentioned it earlier with the whole, we don't think, I mean, from what we've heard, PSG are not particularly impressive Kalista team. Rainbow Seven were banning it. They weren't really picking it. I don't know whether that's because they're All Knights, they just didn't want to leave it open versus them. Also, by the way, All Knights, the team which Rainbow Seven faced in the finals, was Hoglet's ex-team. So Axe's jungler, Hoglet in the LJL, used to play for All Knights. So there's a bit of an LJL, LLA connection there.
What do you know?
I know, right?
I feel like I heard that somewhere.
I think I told you it
but I
before at some
completely
point.
forgot about it.
It's probably cropped up in conversation before. Anyway, just a bit of a thing. Anyway, so I think that V3 are happy with Kalista being around too. Even though Kalista can suffer into Ashe, we have seen some teams still just go like, screw it, we'll just 2v2 you anyway. Even though it's technically a hard matchup, Kalista can do strange and wonderful things versus that champion.
There's a lot of flexibility there. I think the skill checking with that champion as well is rather difficult unless you're the really, really, really good person in the lane. Okay. And I think sometimes that might be a bit too skill intensive, but that's where we have actually seen Archer punish other AD carries and Reiner specifically on that set so many times when a Kalista goes a little bit too close. Reiner's so good at going, and now you're stunned, and now you're in my AD carry space, and now you're dead, and nice meeting you, Kalista. Yeah. You're dead again. Good job. Good job. And now we're killing your your support because you brought them inside to us after we killed you.
I think that could be a real trap against V3. People like, we don't really need to ban Set anymore. He's kind of weak now. You're going to lose if you do that. They're really good at playing Set in 3 different roles, like Lexi was saying. I think there are a whole load of champions just like, yeah, we might want to ban the Set and Galio away just because they play too well around them. I think if teams don't do their homework and just think that patch 10.19, they're a thing of the past, you still probably don't want to give them those champions.
No, and then that just means if they are banning that stuff, it means Boogie gets complete free reign to do as he pleases. You get Paz on a secure champion where we have seen occasionally Paz can just aid the team into carrying through other obscure ways. We know this is a team that is far far more flexible. But now let's gush about V3, gentlemen. We see that EU Masters meta is somewhat more of the same. An interesting rise of Oriana and Lucian and Silas.
Oriana was already kind of around, but...
Exactly. And I mean, this just looks far more of an Arya meta game that is now just complete meta. And god damn, if he was at Worlds, I mean, he'd be legit one of the best mid laners that no one's talking about. But
For sure, yeah.
Let's talk about solo queue, gentlemen. Let's go into the solo queue and let's start gushing about V3 and the sheer, just absurd stuff that's happening on solo queue at the moment for our boys.
There's often a lot of questions about how much you can read into solo queue.
Obviously.
Because I know that way back when, in like Season 6, when H2K got through to the semi-finals, the Ankos was like in Diamond, and he was kind of whatever, and some of the EU players weren't really that high up. There was the famous Season 5 Bulls being stuck in Diamond 2, and then you get to Pentakill versus Fnatic on Darius. It's like,
that was so awkward as a TSM fan.
However, I think that, particularly in context of V3, there are some players we are a little bit worried about in terms of the mechanical caps and how they are playing in lane.
On a fundamental level.
On a fundamental level.
Yeah.
And solo queue is often a good indicator of, can you just mechanically outplay people? What are your laning fundamentals like? Well, turns out some of the V3 players are actually doing really well in solo queue when we might not have expected them to.
Yeah.
The standout player is Ace. Yeah, the standout one is really Ace. We found out through doing some digging, going into some weird Japanese interviews that have happened. We've done our research, ladies and gentlemen. We try and do the best over here at the LJ Officially Unofficial, even on the podcast where it's opinion based. This is a fact. Ace had been boot camping directly with Arya after his series with Sengoku. Potentially even before Sengoku, but we can't confirm that one. I just know it was definitely after. Prepping for DFM, and then when the Worlds was happening, it was seen that Ace was duo queuing with Arya. Boogie was also duoing with Arya. That Ace was getting boot camped and turned into this good player. He's been as high as the 6th best player that's a professional going to Worlds. That's above Bjergsen at that point. Like, he honestly has been playing everything meta as well as his tried and true. He can play Akali. He can play Lucian mid.
I don't think he played a single Akali game the entire year, and he's playing it solo queue. And looking like he was solo killing. I think he's solo killed Magic Felix and stuff like that on that pick. He's been doing some really good stuff. And again, it's solo queue, and people do weird stuff, and people don't take it seriously. But it's better than nothing. And given
he killed Soft M in the Akali versus Zed. But in the Akali versus Zed matchup, so like,
I mean, SOFM is also a jungler, so he's not a lane.
But he's also
he's
also a mechanical god. Anyway, so it's just worth noting that obviously take it with a pinch of salt, but also
Deft on the same team. So
of the players, it would mean a lot for them to get high in solo queue. Ace is the one guy I'd be like, yeah, if this guy's high in solo queue, then I'm impressed because I've had a lot of issues with him throughout this year. So it's pretty heartening for a V3 fan.
Yeah, Boogie has already been challenger. He then went on a sad loss streak with Ace, sadly. So there is that going on, that duo way of climbing. But Boogie then went on a prompt 6-loss streak with Ace. I think there was 1 or 2 Senna games that he had to play. And Boogie, by the way, is hard stuck in the solo queue ladder because for some reason he has to play support or AD carry a few times. And when I mean a few times, he's played
19 games or something.
19 games of Senna with a 26% win rate. That's why his win rate is so garbage.
I'll say part of it as well, as far as I'm aware, jungle is significantly more popular in China than it is in a lot of other regions.
Interesting.
Because things like Lee Sin are super popular, and like the montages that come out of all the Chinese solo queue stuff are insane, and then people want to be like that, and I can't blame them. Like, it's probably why I play jungle. I think it's really cool.
Apparently Rek'Sai is the highest presence jungler on the patch, or the best performing jungler on the patch, though, which is an interesting thing.
Really?
Yeah.
Interesting. I mean, was a bit of that turning up in EU Masters. Putting that out.
Yeah.
Not like. I mean, how many teams were playing it? We should double check that before I.
Yeah, sure. While you're doing that,
it was 7 teams. So it was 8 games and 7 teams played it, which is fairly heavy.
Yeah, I mean, what's worth noting is something that Everyday actually brought up over on our Discord server is how many games are they actually playing? Are they actually doing more solo queue than scrim? Actually, V3 comparably, especially up when you get to the higher level, Ace has less games than most of the people above him by like at least 10 or 15, 20 I mean, if you're someone like Reckless or Magic Felix, you've played over almost 200 games,
Yeah.
200 plus games. He's played only 121. He's like top 10, I think, at the moment in Challenger for all the pros that have traveled over. It's honestly just kind of crazy that they're still scrimming. From what I can see on Twitter and stuff, people are very confident in V3, or they're a little bit scared of V3 if they're actually
again,
participating in scrims.
I wonder if this is, again, because, I mean, if V3 are playing less solo queue, at least on the Super server compared to the Korean solo queue and stuff, if they're playing less games there, I wonder if that is because they're closer to their setups and closer towards teams that they've worked with throughout this year too, like I was saying earlier. So
Potentially.
maybe that's why. Maybe they are actually doing a lot more scrims and prepping that other way.
It's just nice to see our boys playing on a different server and then starting fresh like everybody else, and then actually performing to the same kind of mechanical level as players that hit Ace is currently above. Well, I'm not going to say one of them because I think it's a little bit sacrilege, but I'm going to say it anyway. Caps.
That is sacrilege. Yeah.
Like,
What about Humanoid? There's a player that's currently one of the top players that is actually in the play-in part. He's higher than Humanoid.
I mean, I think
that's far more comparable.
Yeah, I think that. I mean, it's nice.
It's just
it's nice to see. Would I say that Ace is a better player than Human on Caps? No. But it's nice to see him above them in solo queue. It's a bragging right. We'll take those.
Oh, 100%. And like that's all we want. All of the players are in Grandmaster at minimum, or they're in Challenger. So our boys are definitely performing to at least a mechanical level in solo queue as good as good as everyone else, if maybe not a little bit better currently, which is just a bit of comfort. Honestly, with the amount that people are underestimating V3 for me, it's nice to see that our boys are actually like, well, we've held the highest play-in player on the solo queue for 3 days now, 4 days. Like that's been above Core JJ, who's been the highest Team Liquid person. That's been the closest person to us. That's cool just a cool stat to say.
Yeah, it is cool.
But it doesn't mean
proud
much.
of our boy. It doesn't mean as much as we'd like it to, but it does mean something. God, no. So that's cool.
It doesn't mean as much when Boogie was the highest KDA of any professional player.
Yeah,
that was far more of a fun thing to throw around. It's like, yeah, but 27. Deal with it. But gentlemen, we have reached the absolute end of our podcast here. We must quickly answer our questions and then we must go, gentlemen, okay?
Thanks to me.
Our first question comes from Acclaim. Aside from Corporal, have any other LJL players visited the Discord? How close communication with the players and non-Japanese/Korean communities do we have?
The first player into our Discord was actually not Corporal, it was Yoshi from CGA in spring.
Yeah.
So he's messaged every so often. I think when it was his birthday, we said happy birthday and he reacted to that. So that was nice. But no, we don't have too many players within Discord, but it's just those two.
As for like other interactions, we have some fair amount of interaction with some of the Axis players who message us back on tweets and stuff.
Paz too, actually.
Paz as well. I know Boogie follows me on Twitter, so we've really got a rapport. That's
humble
great.
brag.
Yeah, shut at you.
So little bits and pieces.
Except you didn't predict.
I ain't humble about this.
Yeah, and you're not, and you didn't even get the Alice prediction. So maybe now he has to unfollow you and now follow Alex.
Yeah, I see.
He just wants the best.
Glorious.
You have that word. You have that word with him.
But yeah, I mean, we have a limited interaction, and that's just partly just due to the language barrier and everything else. And also, we're just doing English coverage. Like that's our main language for all three of us. Sam has got the most Japanese, and that's a tiny amount.
Practice. Yeah, I'm out of practice now. I used to be fairly conversational, but it's just because I'm not living in Japan anymore. I'm just rusty, frankly.
Yep. And yeah, we don't really have much communication with non-Japanese or the Korean community much. We talk to a few of like the VCS production. I know Alex and Sam are both have some connection with the PCS, and then occasionally we talk to people on Twitter in DMs, but that's pretty much the scope of our interaction with mostly the league community.
If you would like to communicate with us, like to help grow our community, or otherwise invite us to do anything else, we'd really like that. Just saying.
Yeah, no, fair. Other question coming to us Thank you, Acclaimed, for that question. Our second and last question came to us from Miss. Welcome, Miss, to the Discord server. You're a newer member to the Discord server.
Great name, by the way. But just putting that out there. If that's a reference to the game, I think it is. That's a good choice.
I have to assume so.
Although it could just be a particularly cool way of spelling mist as well, which I'm totally down for.
True. They're asking us, what are some of the lane/jungle matchups you're excited to see, gentlemen?
I'm wondering whether we're going to see any Zed this Worlds. He's doing really well in solo queue, and there are a lot of AP junglers in meta. I wonder if we're going to get like a lot of random assassins cropping up. No one's been ballsy enough to pick up Zed. Really notoriously hard to play and competitive, but if one team could do it, it would make me really, really happy. Also, the Sylas flex between jungle and mid to get different matchups has been really fun too.
If you're looking for specific players who I'm potentially excited to see as well, specifically within play-ins, I think some of the jungle matchups, I think in particular, look pretty damn exciting. Like for play-ins, it's a Nanasik, it's Boogie, it's Peanut. The way these guys play the game, play the map is pretty damn exciting. I think there's a lot of very exciting, interesting support matchups as well down in play-ins. You've got Core JJ, you've got Kaiser over in Team A. Hell, there's Snowflower down there as well over in Group B. Of course, we sung Reiner's praises all year, or particularly in summer. It is the likes of Mark, who's not exactly, he's a pretty damn good player over on LGD as well. Definitely Kaiwing for a Talon as well, despite the fact that Talon in a rough space. Kaiwing is still a brilliant player. Be excited.
Yeah, PSG versus V3's bot lane is going to be really fun to watch.
So I think, interestingly, the ones which should be the most interesting to watch, rather than I think some of the other matchups could be a bit more disjointed and one-sided. I do think supports and jungles could be the ones where you get to see a little bit more of a clash of people who are both pretty damn good.
Yeah, I'm very excited just seeing Peanut versus Boogie. Personally, I can't wait to see the best jungler that has come out of the LJL this split,
for sure,
and that versus potentially one of the best junglers in over in China. That's just going to be such a limit test to really see what Boogie is made of more than anything, because he's outside of one or two times, mostly from Steel. It's been kind of free reign for Boogie.
I think that there have been there was even the one loss to Sengoku in the regular split, where Boogie was on the Kazakhs. It wasn't really on Boogie. He actually did as much as he could on the Kazakhs in that composition.
Oh yeah,
and that again, really interesting game. Go watch. So that was V3's second matchup versus Sengoku in the regular split. That was the one time where Sengoku legit beat V3, and I was like, okay, maybe they'll be contenders. Turns out they weren't really. Anyway, yeah, I think Boogie has been so consistent. If he is as calm and collected as he has been throughout playoffs in the regular split, he's going to be really fun to see versus a Nanasik and Peanut. That's in terms of the player matchups. In terms of champions and stuff, I think that seeing a lot of random flexes across the board is going to be really fun. I do think that Sylas is like a three-way flex between mid, jungle, top now. I think that can allow for some weirdness. So hopefully we'll get that.
Well, we will have to see, gentlemen, but that brings us to the very end of our podcast. We have gone on probably far longer than we thought we were going to do with this one. I don't have the timer in front of me,
We're
so
at
I actually
146 right now.
146, well, perfect. This was only meant to be less than an hour, and we've gone way over, so that's what we do best over here.
Always.
Oh, absolutely. There will be some upcoming content. I know, Initialize yourself. You might want to do a little plug here if you'd like.
Yeah, I'll be doing some articles over the next couple of days, trying to get some prep out for some of the teams that people aren't so knowledgeable about for play-ins. In between doing some other work, I've got some writing to be done on Cyberpunk 2077 as well, but that's not to do with the League. So between all the various bits and pieces, I'm going to try and get as much content out, because of course play-ins are starting Friday, and it would be good to get people in the loop for some of the squads that they aren't so knowledgeable about.
So where can people find that, sir?
They will find it on jinx.tv. That's jinx with a J. No, G, not a J. I'm thinking of the league name briefly.
And they can also find it over on your Twitter, right?
They can absolutely find it on my Twitter, which will be @initialize. There is no L, there is only a 1, because to fight for that title, I didn't get it. So there we go.
Very good.
We'll get him to do this smoothly.
Follow me on Jinx.
Well, we will contact Twitter and try and get that one day. No, Mara, do you have anything to plug? Are you going to be doing anything until our next podcast to probably cover what happened in play-ins.
Well, I've got uni starting again, so I won't be doing so much.
Oh,
I
God.
might be... Well, yeah, in fact, I had my first day back today, in fact. Had some online
you did?
lectures. But no, I stream occasionally. I've got my... So that's Nymero and then _ on Twitch. Come find me. Let me know if I'm entertaining or not. Please, come watch. Anyway, no, don't. That's not a guilt trip. So I'll be doing that. If you find... my casts... my casting opportunities are all over the place. If you do want me to cast your stuff, I'm more than willing to do so. I'd really enjoy that. But if you would like to figure out where I am casting next, go follow me on Twitter, which is @Nymera, obviously written on the screen too. So that's where I'm at.
Perfect. And for myself, I am actually currently producing a video on the best team that none of you actually know of, which is V3.
Nice.
I've been talking to a bunch of analysts and everything, because I truly believe they are the best team that no one is talking about. So I am currently producing a short little video which just kind of recaps a bit of V3's moments, and then while I acknowledge my bias, at least talk about the 4 teams that they're going to be playing in that round robin, with some editing assistance probably from Initialize to make sure it actually looks competent and doesn't sound horrible. As that's the man which has the English degree, and I can utilize that for my own purposes. So thank you,
buddy.
sir.
I got
Thank
you,
you,
buddy.
sir.
One of the great many
and-
reasons we keep him around.
One of many great reasons we keep him around, not just for his English, but for also his musical talents and many other things that his giant brain holds, even though he's barely paying attention because I'm watching on the webcam.
I'm paying attention.
Okay, so it looked like you were just like doing something. And yes, I will be doing that. I'm probably going to be starting streaming again at some point, and I'm planning to do a lot more coverage of Worlds. It might just turn into a casual stream where I'm sitting on a Discord server just watching the games and talking with other people, assuming network permitted. Obviously, slightly different setup this time around, everybody. So hopefully we'll be back to the normal runnings of the show moving forward. But with that all said, you can find me at Mars1, at Initialize with a 1, and at Nymera over on Twitter. You can find us at LJLOfficiallyUnofficial, or just LJLOunofficial if you're looking for us over on Twitter. We accept any and all DMs. And with that all said, gentlemen,
I mean,
that's
not all
episode
DMs.
31.
Some of them will get reported.
All DMs, all of the DMs. We'll just ignore them though.
Okay.
But with that said, gentlemen, episode 31's
32.
32 rather is in the book, and that's all we've got time for.